Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and well, we got an interesting guest today, and delighted to have back. Well, it's been a while since we've talked to William Murray, and he's the son of the America's most famous atheist, Madalyn Murray O'Hair. He is the chairman of the Religious Freedom Coalition in Washington, D.C. I'm sure you perhaps have seen him on all of the major networks. And it's been a couple of years since we've had the enjoyment of talking to him. But we want to talk to him today about his new book, The Utopian Road to Hell. So there's an interesting title for you. William, good to see you. It's been, well, I'm trying to think, about 2 or 3 years since I've had you on the program. Good to see you.
Years since I've been on here, Barry.
Yeah, good to see you today. Well, what led you to write this book?
Well, I'm really starting off in the introduction. I sort of introduced Utopian Road to Hell with the fact that I was raised in a Marxist home, that I was a red diaper baby, which is an expression not many people are familiar with today, but in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and or so in early 60s, it was a very familiar. It meant that you were raised in a Marxist home. Sometimes there were entire neighborhoods in cities like San Francisco, New York, Baltimore, Chicago, where just virtually they were Marxist neighborhoods. And that is the background that I have, and Marxism is one of the utopian schemes that I talk about in Utopian Road to Hell, and this is important, particularly in this election year, when we once again have people that are proposing centrally planned utopian dreams that are just based on nothing more than magic thought.
Well, this is very interesting. By the way, before we get too far into this book, tell us about your own conversion. What happened to you to come out of this to where you are today?
Well, Perry, that's interesting. That's a two-stage thing. One of Marxists, communists are typically have never been recruited on college campuses. They've been recruited out of unemployment lines, and that's where they found my mother. She had difficulty holding down a job, not because of a lack of intelligence or education, but because of a personality. So I was raised in that type of background. When I got out of that home and became employed, I did very well in the free marketplace. I became an airline manager, and saw the money that my mother used to get from government was coming out of my paycheck. And that very quickly turned me around against the utopian schemes and the idea of Marxism. And I flipped to the other side and basically became an extreme libertarian, a social Darwinist. But it doesn't take much time being a social Darwinist for the lifestyle that goes along with that to destroy you. And that is what really led to my accepting Christ and coming back to the middle ground.
Well, I know that's a long story put into a short sentence here.
Well, it is. I try. I do have another book called My Life Without God. It's the first book I wrote. This is my 8th book now, but my first book was My Life Without God. It was published in 1982. It's still in print, and people can still find it at Amazon. They can download it to Kindle or Barnes and Noble or anything like that. If they want the full story, it's 350-something page book.
All right, let me remind our viewers and listeners as well, religiousfreedomcoalition.org is the website there for William, religiousfreedomcoalition.org. So let me ask you this. You were growing up to think that government meets all of your needs. Is that the utopian road?
Well, utopianism is It is so far-reaching. It goes back so long. We can start with Plato's Republic and his vision of what a utopian society would be about after the collapse of democracy, of course, because democratic institutions and the utopian dreams are not exclusive to each other. I mean, they don't go together at all. And the Sparta in Greece was one of these centrally planned communities. If we go up, there are several that were in Chinese history that occurred as well that also failed. And then in the 20th century, we saw, or actually starting in the 18th century with the French Revolution, and then with the failed experiments in Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, Soviet Russia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we saw many of these other utopian schemes coming to fruition. Underneath, whether they're fascist, whether they're Nazi, whether they're called socialist, whether they're communist, is one common thread, which is, by the way, always anti-Christian. But at the same time, there is a common thread that a small group of people, a small group of elites, can come together and formulate a plan to take care of all the needs of the people. So they will have no needs. So they will always, so that a shelter, someplace to live, their medical care, their food, all of these things, their transportation, that all of these things are rights in a utopian society, and all of those things will somehow be provided by government. So it is also underlying in the theory, particularly best stated by Marxism, that everybody's production is taken from them according to their ability. In other words, you're supposed to work as hard as you can according to your ability, throw everything in a big pot. And then the second part of that equation is from each according to their need, which means you're only allowed, no matter how much you put into that pot, you're only allowed to take what you need, not what you want, not as much as you've produced, only what you need. And of course, that need is going to be decided by the elites.
We are beginning, well, we're not beginning, we're seeing that in America, but it's really showing up in this campaign cycle with between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton wanting to give you everything you need in life. Bernie Sanders is going as far as saying, we're going to pay for your college, et cetera, et cetera. What's surprising to me is this. They're drawing big crowds, and if you survey the crowds, they're primarily young people who are wanting all of these benefits.
Well, it's very unusual because the people that want the socialism, the quote socialism, which it really isn't, what Bernie Sanders is selling really isn't socialism, but they want somebody, mainly the people that are hardworking that have never gone to college, to pay for their college education and their room and board and their food while they're in college, so that they can then go out in the free marketplace and earn much more money than the people that are paying their way through college. I don't know that that can be defined as socialism. Now, from that's what they want out of it. If you look at the Bernie Sanders side out of it, that isn't what he's really promising, because he is promising a college education to those that he or some elite groups decides they need. You're not going to be able to walk into Harvard or the University of California or the University of Florida or the University of Oregon and say, here I am, educate me for 4 years. The government is going to decide, some entity is going to decide whether or not, based on some criteria, you need that college education. And that might be your sex, it might be your race, it might be your age, it might be your educational background, it might be whether your families are somehow connected to the elite body that makes the decisions. But whether you need that or not is going to be decided by somebody else, not by your desire to go to college.
Well said. Perfectly said. So in your thinking, what's the difference between democratic socialism and the Democratic Party?
Well, I don't think that Bernie Sanders has a real handle on his definition of socialism. Now, he might want a socialism, but what he is describing right now to his followers is not socialism. Well, for instance, he refers to Denmark and say, well, Denmark's socialist and we can do it like Denmark. Denmark is not a socialist country. First of all, Denmark has a population of 5 million people, about half of what New York City does. Those 5 million people are extremely healthy, well-educated, and well-employed in a free free enterprise system. Now, granted, they have the medical care, which, by the way, they have to pay a percentage of, and they have their, quote, free education and so forth and so on. But that is paid for by taxes that come out of their pocket that are generated by the free enterprise system. Not that many people in Denmark work for the government. The vast majority of the people work in free enterprise. The free enterprise, by the way, the corporations there have one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. Which makes their goods and services extremely competitive on a worldwide market. What Denmark actually is a managed capitalist society where the government manages capitalism in order to produce income so that they can tax that income in order to provide certain social benefits which enable the ruling parties to stay in power because they're giving so much out. But the reality is Denmark is not socialist. It just is not a socialist nation. And in fact, to call any of France maybe marginally, but to call any of the major European nations socialist, as we hear coming out of the mouth of Marco Rubio and Trump and Ben Cruz, this is a total misnomer. These aren't socialist countries. They have lower corporate tax rates than we do. They have in fact, they have sold off all of these countries which once were socialist and owned the coal mines and owned the airlines and this and that. They've sold that all off and sold it to free enterprise that they now tax. Some of them have even sold off their post offices and privatized those. How could anyone conceivably call that socialist?
Very interesting. Let me take a break here, William. We'll be right back. We're talking to William Murray. He's the son of the most famous atheist, at least in our days gone by, Madeleine Murray O'Hair. But he's the author of a great book. You might want to pick it up, Utopian Road to Hell. By the way, he also heads up he's the chairman of the Religious Freedom Coalition in Washington, D.C. Let me encourage you to check it out, religiousfreedomcoalition.org. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back, and our special guest today is William Murray. He's the chairman of the Religious Freedom Coalition in Washington, D.C. He's authored a fascinating book entitled The Utopian Road to Hell. By the way, you can connect with him through religiousfreedomcoalition.org. William, let me ask you this. With about 50% of Americans now receiving some form of government aid, is that putting America on this utopian road to hell?
It is, because you have people that are expecting something. The other side of the equation isn't there, though, that you find in a lot of other places. And that is something has to go into the pot. The concept behind true utopianism is from each according to their ability and to each according to their need, at least the Marxist version of it. That means everybody is supposed to be putting in the pot and only taking out what they need. What we have now is almost a majority of the population that are taking from the pot, but they're not putting anything back into the pot. Well, this is going to become a problem because the marginal edge of that is going to continue to move up, because people look at it and say, now, wait a minute, I'm making $27,000 a year, and if I stop working between the aid and the free rent and this and that and the other thing, I'm going to get $29,000 worth of benefits, or $30,000 worth of benefits. So you get that creep along the edge where more and more and more people decide that they're just better off. Why should I work that hard and do all that when my next door neighbor does virtually nothing and has basically the same income and the same benefits from society that I do? And this is one of the problems that happens. Let me give you an example, the Pilgrims. Just as an example, the Pilgrims got over here, they were going to have a biblical act society, a utopian society on earth. They were going to have no money. They were going to have a total communal living. Everybody was going to work as hard as they could. The food and everything was going to be put in the warehouse, and then it was going to be distributed, and there was going to be more than enough for everybody, and they almost starved to death. The governor had to stop the experiment and declare that people could own private property, that every family would own their own lot. They would produce off of that their own lot, and most of their descendants today are extremely wealthy. You know, the society didn't work. You cannot just take human nature out of people and replace it with this centrally planned need where somebody decides what their need is. It is a form of magic thought to think you can. And Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and a lot of those young people today that think that stuff can just keep flowing to them somehow, they are in a state of magic thought as well, which is nothing more than taking a premise that is totally false and building up some kind of a factual universe on that false premise that you live in. It's just it's nothing more than fantasy.
All right, let me shift gears here a little bit. Again, we're talking about his latest book entitled The Utopian Road to Hell. You may want to get a copy. There's a picture there on the screen. And also you can communicate with him through his website, religiousfreedomcoalition.org. I want to kind of go over there just for a moment with the time we have left. What's happening to religious freedom in America? And I know that's a big question, and I ask it out of personal concern because I just returned from the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, been going there for many, many, many years. There's a serious tone. There's a threat against our First Amendment rights and our religious freedom. What's your take?
Yeah, there's a talk, a speech that I give when I'm invited to speak on Religious Freedom Day in the United States at various venues and things like that. And I've used the same theme in my testimony at different at congressional hearings and state legislature hearings. And I start off by saying this: if I am not allowed to offend someone today, then I do not live in a free nation. And that is the singular problem that we have. If you have freedom of religion, true freedom of religion, then you automatically have freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of assembly. Those are things that come automatically with freedom of religion. Not freedom to worship, which is what Barack Obama says we have, but freedom of religion. So this is why it's mentioned first in the First Amendment and then the others, because if you don't have freedom of religion, you don't have any of those things. If you're not allowed to speak freely about your religion anywhere, if the government can stop you from talking about your religion, the government can stop you from talking about anything. If the government can stop you from publishing something about your religion, they can stop you from publishing anything. If the government can stop you from assembling on behalf of your religion, then the government can stop you from assembling for anything at all. So it is the core. And if you look around the world, any nation that doesn't have true religious freedom has no freedom. They don't have freedom of speech. They don't have freedom of press. They don't have freedom of assembly. We see that in Cuba. We saw it in China before they started to open up. We saw it in the Soviet Union before it was dissolved and became Russia. We see it in all the Islamic countries. We see Turkey's secular society being destroyed and religious freedom being tossed to the side, and with it all the other freedoms as that becomes the new caliphate in the Middle East. So this is a genuine problem and a genuine threat. And part of the problem is that people, including our government, Democrats and Republican leaders, they confuse democracy with freedom. Those are two different things. Democracy is nothing but a process of picking leaders. It has nothing to do with freedom. You can live give you an example. Iran has a democratic system for electing people. It is not a it is not a free nation. You don't have freedom of press. You don't true freedom of press. You don't have a true freedom of religion. You don't have true freedom of speech. But they're all of their officials down from dog catcher to the president are elected by a democratic process, and they have opponents that they run against. So democracy and freedom are just not the same thing. And the core of freedom is religious freedom. And they've lost that in most of the European countries. People have been arrested for simply defending their Christian faith in a hotel lobby when it was challenged by a Muslim. So this is a core problem, and I don't think the people that believe, oh, I'm offended by the public display of religion, so I should have the right to stop you from talking about your religion. They don't quite understand that if I'm not allowed to talk about my religion, if I'm not allowed to pray in public, if I'm not allowed to pray in a public venue and, quote, offend them, then their rights to public speech can also be taken away.
So how is it being threatened in America? I mean, we're hearing some, well, from the broadcast standpoint, I can tell you there's a lot of threats coming at us. Maybe even the fairness doctrine being re-implemented. But overall, since you are the chairman there of the Religious Freedom Coalition, how threatened is it in the United States?
But what is happening is the elites are trying to force upon us the freedom of worship rather than the freedom of religion, which is basically what you have in many of Christians have in the Islamic nations, which means you can go inside of the four walls of your church and you can worship your God there. But when you come outside of those four walls, you have the freedom to worship in there. But when you come out of those four walls, you're the subject of the secular government. You have to fall to the whims of the secular government, and you cannot.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I think we had a little technical problem. I apologize for that. Let me just say this to our viewers and listeners. You can go to religiousfreedomcoalition.org and check in with Bill there, or William, I should say, Murray. Again, he's the chairman of the Religious Freedom Coalition in Washington, D.C., and I'm glad we have reconnected with him. I look forward to spending some more time talking to him. I don't know if you knew or about his mother, Madeleine Murray O'Hare. She was she was the leading atheist in our country for years. And he was raised in that environment. Now he's obviously converted, and he's a terrific spokesperson, not only for the Religious Freedom Coalition, but for a lot of issues as it relates to religious freedom in America. And again, his book is entitled The Utopian Road to Hell, and you may want to check it out. There's a picture there on the screen. Do we have him back just for a second? Okay, Billy or William, are you there? No, we don't. Okay, sorry about that. So we'll reconnect with him down the road, and we'll take a quick break and be right back.